So Nvidia has revealed their new 5000 series graphics cards that cost thousands of dollars, and then right afterwards they showed us that we're all going to be losing our jobs and then we're going to be replaced by AI. So I don't know how Jensen expects us to be able to buy these graphics cards if we don't have a jobs, if we're just, slaves in the matrix being, harvested for our energies, but we'll find out in 2030 we'll probably all lose our jobs. But hey, in the meantime, we can play some video games with fake frames. But before we get into the discussion of are fake frames good or bad, let's first talk about some of the misconceptions there are. First, we gotta look at this chart right here because that's where a lot of misconceptions are from. First, if we just look at this part right over, oh god, my hand is the other way. Right over here, the first one on here, which is gonna be Far Cry 6, just running with ray tracing on here. As you can see, we have a 20% boost on the 5090 over the 4090. Meaning when it comes to raw performance, we're going to be getting around, I want to say 20% performance over the previous generation. Then if we look at the next one right here, we're getting around 30% improvement. And the reason for that is because we're using DLSS. So by this, we can assume that DLSS is going to be 10% better on 5090 over the 4090 when it comes to getting more performance out of the same scenario. Now, once we go to this side of the screen, then this is where it gets wonky for a little bit, because I think people see these like crazy scores on here and they're like, oh, it's just fake frames. And some of it is true on here, but some of it is not. So let's take a look at them. So first, we have the first two games on here, Alan Wake 2. And then we have Black Myth's Wukong on here. Both of them using DLSS with full ray tracing on them. And all these games they're using is the new frame gen technology, which was available for the 4000 cards, which I actually like a lot. But there are some caveats with that technology, which I'm going to go into. But previously it was doing 2 times, and now they can do 4 times with new AI magic or whatever. Now, if we look at the last two things on here, we have D5 render on here, which is kind of, I feel like is misleading on here because the software is called D5 render, but this isn't rendering times. I'm guessing this is just the performance you get while using a software called D5 render, which is a 3D rendering software. So I guess it's able to use the same DLSS technology on here with the frame generation on there also. And here at the end, we have generative AI with FlexLab, which FlexLab is pretty much the most intensive model you can use when you're trying to do generative images on there, and you're getting double the performance on here, which is pretty crazy because, again, this isn't like a fake software, rendering 4 times bullshit. That's the same with the games on here. On here, you get actually raw performance when it comes to rendering AI images, which, as you can see, especially if you watch the keynote, that's where Nvidia's focus is. Especially if you watch the keynote, most of the focus was just about AI, and that's because that's where they're making their money right now. That's why when you look at FluxDev, you're getting double the performance because anyone that's like using, AI to render images, especially like these giant tech companies, Google's doing it, Facebook is doing it, all these companies do it. They just want them to buy their new graphics cards. They don't really care about gaming, honestly. That's why when it comes to raw performance of games, it's more like 20%. But then when it comes to, AI image generation, you're getting double the performance compared to the previous generation, because I'm guessing that's where they're putting all of their budget into on how to, generate more AI stuff. And as a byproduct of the AI stuff, they're able to do better DLSS, better frame generation, besides getting raw performance out of their cards. And honestly, they don't really need to do it anymore since they don't really have any competition. If you look at AMD, they're still competing on the lower end, but if you go to higher end of gaming or even like AI generation, Nvidia is destroying them. If you look at Intel, they're starting to come back with their B50 card that's actually very popular on there. So, but again, they're still fighting at that low end gaming area. But when it comes to the high end gaming, Nvidia is still dominating the space, so they don't really need to improve a lot. I think once they AMD or Intel pick up and they start to compete at that higher end, I think that's when Nvidia will start pushing out more powerful technologies. But for now, they're sticking to the software stuff on there because they can just keep the same amount of power on there to use software to destroy the competition. But now let's talk about the main question: is fake frames good or bad? And to be honest, it depends on the scenario. So for that, let me just open up Cyberpunk. All right, now if we look at Cyberpunk right here, we're getting 80 FPS right now. We're playing the game completely maxed out on an NVIDIA RTX 4080 Super on here, on with the DLSS performance mode on here. We're playing 1440p on here, and we have frame generation off, and the game looks good. It feels really good because we're getting 80 FPS on here. And now if I enable frame gen on here and I click apply on there, I already restarted my game. Now I'm getting 135 FPS. And guess what? The game looks smoother. Maybe there's a little bit of input delay on here, but I don't really feel it that much. Overall, it's a better experience on here. And with their new technology, if besides getting 120 FPS, if I'm getting 240 FPS, sure, that would be nice. My monitor can only do 100 FPS, but in the future, if I buy one of these newer monitors that can do like 240 or 480 FPS, for those stuff, it will work great. But now let me show you guys another scenario. So if we disable frame gen on here, and besides using performance mode, we just turn off DLSS, and then let's see how much frames we get on the game. And without DLSS, we're getting 27 FPS right now. So if we only have 20% better performance on here, besides getting 30 FPS, I will be getting 36 FPS on a 5080 Super if they ever release a Super on here. But you know what? NVIDIA's like, you know what? Let's add some fake frames on here. That'll fix it, right? So if we do that on here and then we go to frame generation and we just enable that without any DLSS, now we get 60 FPS. So it must be smooth, right? And this is a horrible experience right here. Like there's like literally like almost like a second long delay between, oh my god, and there's a crazy amount of ghosting happening on here. As you can see, there's like giant trails behind everything. It feels like I'm drunk. This person is floating. I don't think that's frame gen. I think that's just Cyberpunk. But there's insane input lag right now on the game, and everything's going, this is a terrible experience. You can't play the game like this. It doesn't matter if it's 60 FPS. It doesn't matter if they boost it up to 120 FPS. You still need the raw performance in order to be able to do this on here. So they just expect you to, besides playing the game at your native resolution, they just want you to use DLSS and then go to performance mode on there. And then we can go back to, you know, having 140 FPS. That honestly, it looks pretty good. Like I'm actually a believer in DLSS. I think it does a pretty good job, even on performance mode. Like it still looks really great on here. In conclusion, frame gen is great if you're already getting great frame rates in the game. But if you're not getting great frame rates, then it's a terrible experience. So what is the point? It's only good for people getting 100 FPS and they want to get 400 FPS. But if you're at 20 FPS, you're not going to get 60 FPS using it. Honestly, it's just so weird with these newer games that, you know, all these newer games, they look great and feel great, but there is always something just off with them. Like with all of these games that are coming out, why am I going out of focus? Coming out, they all just feel a little bit off. And then recently I've been going back to playing older games on my new TV with the new graphics card and everything just looks so crisp on there. Like we look at a game like Half-Life 2 and like the game just looks so crisp and beautiful. Like everything is so sharp in this game compared to the newer games where there isn't any, you know, DLSS or any like frame gen or whatever. Everything is real frames and like we don't have to, you know, lie about frame rate. But then we check the frame rate on these games. Oh, I'm getting a casual 800 frames per second. Look at these beautiful reflections on the game. There's no ray tracing on here. This is just regular. I mean, he doesn't have any shadows, so I guess it's not that realistic. But in order to be able to get reflections like these on games nowadays, you have to enable ray tracing. And then you have to, in order to enable ray tracing, then you have to enable DLSS. And then you enable DLSS, then you have to enable frame rate. It's like, Man, I just want to play some games that's, don't hurt my eyes, that are just have sharp graphics on them. I just spent $2,000. Can I get some actual pixels on here? Jensen, can I get some real pixels, please?